So, another kind of statement about women that we sometimes encounter in Buddhist texts and teachings is that being born female is unfortunate or less fortunate than being born male. And it seems that at least one word for woman in Tibetan language is Khemen, which means inferior rebirth. I heard this from Lama Kunga, a Tibetan Lama who has lived and taught in Berkeley, California for many years. And he said that he changed for himself, he changed the spelling of the word because men can mean inferior, but it can also mean medicine, depending on how you spell it in Tibetan. So he changed it to the men that means medicine. So he said for him, women are medicine for men. So it seems clear that he doesn't agree that women are inferior. And I've also heard in the Tibetan tradition, and it may be true in other Asian cultures as well, that women are encouraged to pray for a male rebirth in their future lives so that they will have better opportunities to learn and practice the Dharma. And this comes up in the story of Tara. So the story of Tara is that long ago in another universe, she was a princess and was very devoted to the Buddha, and she developed bodhicitta, the aspiration to become a Buddha herself, so that she could help all sentient beings. And then she began working to create the causes to become a Buddha. And when some monks heard about this, they advised her to dedicate her merits to be reborn as a male. But she didn't buy into that. She rejected this advice and said, "Here there is no man, there is no woman, no self, no person, and no consciousness. Labeling male or female has no essence, but deceives the evil-minded world." So clearly she had great wisdom. And then she went on to promise that she would always remain in the form of a female to work for the benefit of all sentient beings until samsara is empty, meaning empty of sentient beings, because it's already empty of inherent existence. So where does this idea come from about, female rebirth being inferior? And is there any justification for it? So I'm not sure whether or not the Buddha himself actually spoke about this in any of the sutras. I haven't read all the sutras. Many of them aren't even translated. But in some Lamrim texts, we tend to study the Lamrim. That's the kind of main basis for our study and practice. So in some traditional Lamrim texts, in the section on karma, there's a list of 8 qualities. These are not the 8 freedoms of a precious human rebirth, but 8 attributes of a fully qualified human body and mind. So the idea is, if we want the best basis to, in our future lives, we want the best kind of situation, body and mind, to be able to engage in study and practice and continue on the path, then we should try to have these 8 qualities. So one of these 8 is being male. And Lama Tsongkhapa says, as a male, you will have the capacity for all good qualities, for skilled actions, for broad wisdom. You will be unafraid in assemblies and will have no obstacles, whether accompanying living beings, speaking to them, enjoying resources with them, or dwelling in isolation. So does this mean that every person with a male body is in a better position to develop good qualities, do skilled actions, and have broad wisdom? And those with female bodies are unable to do these? Is there pervasion? If that were the case, we would have to say that the likes of Venerable Thupten Chodron, Venerable Tenzin Palmo, Venerable Karma Lekche Somo, Geshe-ma Kelsang Wangmo, and so on are lacking in these qualities simply because they have a female body. And it's clearly not the case. And we would also have to say that the likes of Adolf Hitler, Osama bin Laden, Mao Zedong, just to mention a few, do have all these qualities. So clearly there's no pervasion. Paboka Rinpoche's Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, another Lamrim text, says that as a male, you will not be afraid in a crowd, and that when you live in deserted places, you will have few hindrances and interferences in practicing Dharma. So there may be some truth that some women are shy about speaking to a large group of people. But there's no pervasion. As we can see today with a number of women in leadership positions, we have women who are presidents and prime ministers and CEOs, and they're speaking to large groups of people with great courage. And we see even young girls like Greta Thunberg and Malala Yousafzai. I'm not sure if I say her name properly. So as teenagers, they have spoken in front of large and even esteemed assemblies like the United Nations and the European Congress. So again, no pervasion that as a female you have this kind of fear of speaking in public. And I've also met and heard of men who are shy and afraid of speaking in public, or even to a small group of people in a social situation. And as for living in isolated places, there are cases of women, probably in all Buddhist cultures, Chinese and Theravada and Tibetan, who went into retreat in isolated places and did very well. For example, we have Jetsuma Tenzin Palmo, who spent 12 years living in a cave up in the Himalayas. So again, there's no pervasion about these statements. Now, some people might be uncomfortable with what I'm saying, because I'm challenging what is written in the Lamrim. But did the Buddha say that we should blindly accept whatever he taught without questioning, without investigation? No. He said we should investigate and analyze his words in the same way that a goldsmith checks some material, which is supposed to be gold, to check if it is genuine gold or not. So since we should do that with the Buddha's words, doesn't it make sense that we should do that with the words of other Buddhist teachers, writers, and so on? And also, His Holiness, in the book that Venerable Children edited, Buddhism, One Teacher, Many Traditions, says that we must examine passages in Buddhist texts as well as attitudes and practices in our communities that are biased against women. The Buddha wanted his Sangha to conform with many of the cultural attitudes of that time. As the Sangha, we must do this in the 21st century as well. Since modern societies, as well as the United Nations, stress the importance of gender equality and respect for women, we Buddhists must do so as well. So I think that gives us the right to go ahead and investigate these kind of traditional statements and attitudes and traditions. And I'd just like to mention this book, which is called The First Buddhist Women. I read this a number of years ago and was really, really impressed by it. The author is Susan Murcott, and it's based on the Therigatha. The Therigatha is part of the Pali canon, and it's songs or verses of the Theris. The Theris are the female elders, the senior nuns in the Buddhist tradition. And so these were nuns who, lived at the time of the Buddha. They met the Buddha. They became disciples of the Buddha. They were the earliest nuns, thankfully, starting the tradition that we're still part of. And so there were a number of women who were in this position. They met the Buddha, became his disciples, and practiced what he taught, and attained nirvana. They attained the enlightenment of the fundamental vehicle, the state of arhat. But we don't hear about them, right? Normally we hear stories of the great male disciples of the Buddha and what they did and what they said and so on. But the female disciples are kind of hidden. But they did exist, and it's very, very inspiring to read their stories. So just briefly, one example is Mahapajapati Gotami. She was the Buddha's stepmother and aunt. She was the younger sister of the Buddha's mother, Maya. So both Maya and Mahapajapati, the two sisters, were wives of Shuddhodana, the Buddha's father. And so when Maya gave birth to the Siddhartha, who became the Buddha, she passed away 7 days later. And Mahapajapati, her sister, Buddha's aunt, took care of this little baby Buddha, with great love and kindness and compassion. And then later, of course, Siddhartha left home, went to the forest, meditated, became the Buddha, and began teaching. And after some time, he returned to the place where he was born and met his family. And they listened to his teachings and became followers. At least some of them did, like his father, Shuddhodana, and Mahapajapati. And then later, she felt the strong wish to renounce everything and become a follower, an ordained person. And at that time, there were no nuns, but she and a number of other Sakya women from that clan approached the Buddha and asked to be ordained. And initially he said no. There's a whole story behind that. But anyway, and finally Ananda, the Buddha's attendant, asked the Buddha, is it possible for women to attain nirvana and the various stages up to nirvana? And he said yes. So with that, he then accepted Mahapajapati as the first nun, and then other women were ordained afterwards. And so she learned some teachings from the Buddha. She received a subject of meditation, and by meditating on it, was able to attain nirvana. And she lived to the age of 120, quite amazing, and had a peaceful death. Buddha came to visit her before she died. And it said that when she died, there were miracles occurred. Miracles occurred both at the time she passed away and at her cremation. And they were similar to the kind of miracles that took place when the Buddha himself died. So clearly she was a highly accomplished and highly respected person. Yeah, and we're very grateful to her for her courage and determination and persistence in not taking no for an answer and continuing to ask on behalf of all women, including us now today, to start an order of nuns. But, it's clear that the Buddha himself did have the wish to do that. Even before he began teaching, he made a statement that it was his intention to start an order of monks, an order of nuns, and then communities of laymen and laywomen. So it can look, from the story, it looks a little bit like he was reluctant to accept nuns, but from his own statements, he did want to have an order of nuns, and he didn't want to pass away until that had been established. So we're very grateful for these early Buddhist women, and I'll share some other stories later in coming BBCs. So I think these stories show that women, having a female form, female body, female life is certainly not a hindrance to being able to learn, study, practice, and attain the goals of practice, awakening. Thank you.